Chardonnay tasting that we're doing this year. So with the on the weekend, and that was pretty. You know, I was pretty happy with how that went. It was good fun, and this is the Zoom part. So we shall see how this goes. But the wines I've already tasted, and I was very happy with all the wines. So I'm looking forward to tasting them again. So, shall we see how we're going here?
I'm just admitting people in and organising the chat. Right.
Anyway, so we should tell you about where we're up to in the vineyard at the moment. So it's been an extremely cold year. We haven't even had any veraison in Chardonnay. So we would normally have that first stage, called, you know, of berry ripening, is called veraison, where the berry becomes a little bit translucent and starts to soften. And normally that happens about this week, or maybe might have happened last week, but it hasn't, and it doesn't look like it's going to happen for at least another 3 weeks. So it's going to be a late season. I don't expect that we'll be picking Chardonnay in Geelong till maybe April, I think in Henty might even be into mid-April, so it's going to be very interesting. So I think many of you may know, I'm not sure if you sent out an email about the storms.
No, we haven't sent out an official email.
Oh yeah, so we were, not sure if I want to send an official email about storms, but we've had some pretty horrific weather over the last 3 weeks, I guess. So about 2 weeks ago, we had 80 millimeters of rain in the form of very spiky hail, and it took out most of the fruit out of the Leflaive vineyard. So unfortunately, it's looking a bit like a war zone here at the moment, which is a bit unfortunate. So we've lost the Gamay for this year, and potentially the some blocks of Chardonnay and some blocks of the Bartl will be affected as well. But I'm hopeful that we will still get some Indra, and actually I think the Meursault maybe as well, but the Sangiovese also got badly affected. So that's the bad news. But on the good news front, the wine community is very strong, and there's been a lot of kind people have actually heard on the grapevine, no pun intended, that we had a bit of a problem, and so we've ended up had some lovely offers from my fellow compatriot winemakers for some fruit. So Bannockburn were very kind and offered me some of their Shiraz, which is pretty exciting, because it was one of the reasons I came to this part of Geelong to grow grapes, is because of my love of the Bannockburn wines, and especially their back in the 80s and 90s, their cool climate Shirazes. So I'm going to have an opportunity to make that wine this year, which is kind of cool. And on another extreme, there's a very famous vineyard in the Barossa called Hoffmann, which is I think 5th or 6th or maybe 7th generation German family that came to the Barossa. They've got a very famous vineyard called surprisingly, the Hoffmann vineyard. It goes into things like Grange and Armand Ra and Chris Ringland and Torbreck and things like that. And Adrian Hoffmann rang me and offered me some fruit from there. So I'm going to make a ton of Barossa Shiraz, which will be pretty interesting, because I've never done that before, and I've got to think about how to make that wine in a way that respects where it's from, but also I think it has, you know, there's no point in me making it exactly the way as another Barossa winemaker. So I will give it the Lethbridge treatment. Haven't quite worked out what that might be, but it'll be interesting to see. So that's on the plan. And then the Gamay is the one that, you know, obviously there's not much Gamay planted in Australia, so the idea of getting in Gamay seemed a little unrealistic. So as it turned out, this year I'm actually in Beaujolais visiting Pierre-Marie Charmat, making wine with him. And also, some of you may remember we had a French winemaker working with me a couple of years ago called Philippe. and so he's in Beaujolais as well, and so I'm going to be going and seeing them. And Philippe has kindly offered me a couple of tons of a Cru Beaujolais fruit from Cru Beaujolais vineyard called Renier, which I think would suit my style somewhat. And I'm going to make it with him over there, and then I'm going to bring it back in barrels or in tank, and then finish the maturation in our cellars in Australia. So I'll actually get to make a bit of Beaujolais, so that'll be kind of fun as well. So certainly there are silver linings to this little storm. So hopefully you'll all get to see some of these wines that we get to make this season. So how are we going there? Daniel, are we all in?
I've just got a question from Susan Knight while we're waiting to admit one more person. How do you transport the grapes to you?
From where? Oh, well, I guess, so from the Barossa, it's going to come, it'll go by truck. So it's refrigerated truck will, I'll go over there potentially, depending on how we're going. I'll go over there, have the fruit put onto a truck, a refrigerated truck, and it'll come directly to us. From Bannockburn, we'll just go and pick it up with a trailer. So that's not going to be too hard. I mean, Bannockburn are only 13k down the road. Beaujolais, on the other hand, obviously a little bit more tricky. So that's hence we're not going to be actually making, we won't get the fruit. I will be over there, so I'll make the wine in with Philippe in his domain. And then I'm going to be there till November, so we'll allow the wine to go through primary fermentation, and then it'll be relatively fresh wine, well, it'll be really fresh wine. And then we will put that into either a tank or barrel, probably tank, and send it by ship. And it'll arrive here 44 days later, God willing. And we will then transport it out of the tank into barrels and keep it in barrels for another 6-8 months. So that's how we're going to do the Beaujolais.
It'll be a great opportunity to taste it alongside the Gamay.
Yeah, it will be. It'll be super interesting actually, because obviously having the opportunity to actually make Gamay for the first time last year was lots of fun, and hopefully some of you have had an opportunity to taste it. I think we've sold out, have we?
Almost
sold out, yeah. So, and we only just released it really in November. So, I think mainly just restaurants are left with a little bit now. I think not much in the cellar. So that's kind of cool, and I think it's pretty well received. But to actually work with Gamay from Beaujolais, from one of the more interesting cruise sites as well, will be pretty interesting, I think. Good. So what I would like you to do is get your glasses ready. Now, hopefully you've got more than one glass in front of you. It'd be nice if you had 3. If you have, that would be good. Was that the instructions you sent out?
Yes.
Excellent. And hopefully 3 glasses that are identical, because I'm a bit of a glass Nazi, and glasses do make a bit of a difference to the way wine tastes. And today what I would like to be able to do is compare the wines in each of the flights. So we're looking at 3 wines in the first flight, 2 in the second, and 3 in the last flight. So let us begin by my glasses. And you have 3 wines in front of you, and just the convention is always pour wine 1 in your left-hand glass, and wine 2 obviously in the middle glass, and wine 3 in your right-hand glass. So if you have a look at your labels, they should say 1, 2, and 3. Perfect. And let's do that, shall we?
Yeah.
So there is wine 2. We're going to share?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just sorting out something.
No worries. So this is wine 2 for you. Wine 2.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Wine. So I'll let you all do that first, and then I can talk to you about. Hopefully they're not too cold. That's the other thing about Chardonnay. Often, obviously, we keep in Australia our wines in fridges, and fridges are generally set at 4 degrees. which is not the temperature for fine wine. So I think that the better the wine, the warmer up to a point you should drink it. And I think that Chardonnay, good Chardonnay, so that is wine.
1, 2.
No, I poured that as 2. Sorry, don't mix them up. So, wine 1. So basically, my belief is Chardonnay tastes best at around about 13, 14 degrees. What's your thought as a sommelier?
I would 12, 13, so just about the same. That's what cellar temperature would be.
Yeah, I tend to, I mean, I guess that it's interesting, you know, like I suppose that's right. Usually, you know, I find that as a winemakers, we tend to drink wines and white wines a bit warmer because, of course, it's the temperature of a cellar or it's the temperature of a bottle that we're just grabbing, you know, without being in the fridge. And when the wine is warmer, you can actually smell and taste more. So you've heard me talk about it perhaps in the past about if you've got a cheap and less interesting wine, cool it down to 4 degrees because you won't notice how bad it is because you can't taste it. But if it's a really fine wine, and some of these are, well, in fact, I think all these are pretty interesting wines, to actually get the aroma and the right texture, you have to have it at the right temperature. So anything between 12 and 14 degrees is pretty good. So the way you can always do that is warm your glass up in your hand. So these are a fraction cold for me. I'm just warming them up so that we can actually taste them. So I'll tell you a little bit about Chardonnay before we get stuck into it while the wines start to warm up a bit. So Chardonnay is the great white wine of Burgundy. Burgundy, for those that don't know, is in France, and it's on the eastern border with Germany and Switzerland, and bits of it south enough goes probably into Italy. I'm not really sure about that bit actually, but we will pull up a map and show you. I will show you a little map of where it is in France, and Daniel will do that. When he's worked with technology. Yeah, so so it's obviously Burgundy is also well known for Pinot Noir. So hence Pinot Noir and Burgundy, and Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the two great grapes of Burgundy. Both have climates which are not outrageously different to what we see in Geelong. If anything, Geelong is a fraction warmer than most of Burgundy. I think it's probably now, as the years have gone by and we're starting to see a little bit more climate change, perhaps not this year so much in that way, but we've found that our temperatures are actually starting to look a bit more like Beaujolais, hence we've been planting Gamay. So within Burgundy, the northern part of Burgundy, so north of the town of Beaune, is mostly red wine, and south of Beaune is mostly white wine. And the first village out of Beaune, that's a white wine village, is Meursault, and after that is Puligny. So we are looking at, actually, I should say, technically, another part of Burgundy is actually Chablis. I forgot all about Chablis. No, Chablis, we should actually show them on the map, actually. Let's pull it up. So this will actually put everything into perspective a bit and make sense of why Chablis is the way Chablis is.
Chablis, you will actually find, is in this region just up here. It's actually closer to Champagne than it is to Paris. You'll forgive me for not highlighting.
Yeah, to Dijon. Yeah, so Dijon is technically the sort of the northernmost major town in the Côte d'Or, which is where you see most of the Pinot and Chardonnay grown. But just outside of Paris, still in the Duchy of Burgundy, in the old Duchy of Burgundy, you had Chablis, and Chablis is known for Chardonnay made in a particular style. The soils of Chablis are a little bit, well, actually they're significantly different to what you see between Dijon and Lyon. Well, Dijon and Beaune, really, around Beaune. The soils in the Côte d'Or, where you see most of, you know, white Burgundy and red Burgundy, it's mainly a limestone marl, which is red clay with limestone mixed through it. While in Chablis, you start to see much more hard limestone, and that Pyramidine soils for Chablis and Portlandian soils, which are also a limestone-derived soil for Petit Chablis. But the major contribution, I think, is that you can see from the map that it's quite a lot further north. And if you think about Europe, the further north you go in Europe, the cooler it is. So one of the biggest defining factors between looking at Chablis and looking at white Burgundy from the Côte d'Or is that Côte d'Or will be warmer than Chablis. And what we find in Geelong, for instance, that we are actually perhaps even a little bit on average, a little bit warmer than most of Burgundy, but nowhere near as warm as, say, Margaret River or the Yarra Valley or Mornington or whatever like that. So we are in the mainland Australia. Actually, let me think. In all of Australia, there are 2 areas that are cooler than Geelong, 3 areas. There's Macedon, which is slightly cooler than Geelong. There is Drumbook, which is about 2 weeks cooler. Now, what do I mean by 2 weeks cooler? It doesn't seem to make sense using a unit of weeks as a unit of temperature. But what I mean is that when someone says to you, I'm in a cool climate or whatever, when they're talking about grapes, it's really, you should be talking about not so much, I always ask, how do you define that? And really the single best way to define it is, when do you pick the fruit at the same sort of potential alcohol? So if you're picking potential alcohol, say of 13 or thereabouts, which is pretty normal, if you pick that in April, as we will this year, that's a cool vintage. If you pick it in May, that's very, very cool. If you pick it in like they do in the Hunter in January or December, that's not so cold, you know. So you can see that so the time tells you how cool it is. So really, in our hands, Geelong is cooler than the Yarra Valley. We pick about between 3 and 4 weeks earlier than the Yarra. We pick between 2 and 3 weeks earlier than Mornington. Even within Geelong, Lethbridge picks at least 1 to 2 weeks earlier than the Bellarine. This is for red and white. And if you went to Drumbook, we actually pick there after we pick in Geelong, probably by another two weeks. And Macedon's about 1 week after us. So that's kind of his hierarchy.
And I suppose it's worth saying as well that when you are in a cooler climate, it means that you have the potential to have your fruit on the vine for longer, ripening over longer periods. Slower ripening means
different things. Yeah, so I mean, this is the whole point. Why am I talking about all this? It seems a bit boring, really, because we've got these lovely wines in front of us, and I'm talking about grape ripening. But the thing about it is, grape ripening, what Daniel was talking about, the time actually influences 2 major things about the flavour and the structure of the wine. Number one, the cooler the site is, the more likelihood that you are going to get cooler fruit characteristics. What do I mean by that? Well, cooler fruit characteristics are things like white nectarine, white fig, perhaps not even much fruit at all. It's sort of like greener fruit characters. And it's easy to think about, if you think about tropical fruit comes from warmer climates, and you see more tropical flavours and maybe yellow cling peach and all these sort of Yellowstone fruit in warmer sites. So if you think about Margaret River, which is a warm, in my opinion, quite a warm place to grow Chardonnay, you see much richer, riper characteristics in the flavour spectrum. That's number one, that's flavour. Number 2 is the acidity, the natural acidity of the wine. As you have fruit sitting in warmer climates, they lose acidity quicker. So if you're seeing cooler climate wines, you tend to see that they have a lot more natural acidity. They have more raciness. They're a bit more zingy. And I think that's another defining feature about it. So we're going to look at the first three wines, and I'm just going to, why I'm giving you all of this background is because when you look, we don't know what these wines are or what order they're in, but I can tell a little bit about each of these wines. So I'd like you to do a little bit of a guess, I guess, and see how you go in identifying which wine is which. So what can we expect from a Petit Chablis from 2019? What about you, Daniel? I know what to expect.
What you find from Chablis is that they tend to be on the lighter in body side of Chardonnays worldwide. If you had to put a line or a spectrum of Chardonnay worldwide, Chablis would definitely be in the lighter body, particularly Petit Chablis. Mm-hmm. Petit Chablis is basically what little Chablis. So on the hierarchy of appellations, you have Petit Chablis, Chablis, Premier Cru, Grand Cru. So these wines in Petit Chablis tend to be a little bit simpler in their style. They will be unoaked, lighter body, which I've mentioned. They'll have really good high acidity, and the flavors will be, well, almost, you'll get more citrusy flavors because it is a cooler site. Like we said, that kind of almost logical progression. Cooler sites, more citrusy flavors; warmer sites, more tropical flavors. So yeah, Chablis will be more kind of green peas, citrus. It might have a little bit of green fruit in there as well.
Yeah, green gage, plum, this sort of thing. Yeah, so they're really quite greener flavors, and also because of the limestone soils, you seem to get more of this sort of sense of the sea. You'll start to see this sort of, oyster grit, oyster shell, briny, salty, anything you can think. Imagine the sea, and if you have limestone soil, you're more likely to see. No pun intended. You're more likely to see it. So that's really what we're looking for in Chablis. Now, I will talk about the Alto-Adige Italian wine as well, because that is up in the mountains. It's also on limestone soils, but the Italians tend to also make their wines quite light by actually picking relatively less ripe. Yeah, early, that's the right word. So they're high in acid, they're quite light in body, they're perhaps a little bit more neutral in flavour, but the big thing is the acidity is paramount.
Typically Italian, they have a lot of salt in their food and they like their wines with very high acidity.
Also, they have a lot of oil in their food as well. Yeah. So one of the lovely things about high acidity in wine is that it cuts through. And then Ooh La La, it's grown from much warmer sites. It's Geelong. Ooh La La, this one is it, or it's I'm trying to remember.
It's Strathbogie.
Okay, so Strathbogie. So it's at 800 meters. So it's actually quite high up, but it's what I jokingly call the Strathbogie Ranges the Upper Yarra because it's just up from Warburton, but it's up in the hills up there. So it's around about 600 to 800 meters, this vineyard, and it is cool, but it's not. It's actually not that different to Geelong, actually, where that particular vineyard. We pick it at probably maybe a few days earlier than we pick our Geelong vineyards, but very similar. But so what you're starting to see is more richness, a little bit more body, so there'll be more weight in the wine, and the flavour spectrum will be towards white stone fruit. So you might see white nectarine, you might see white peach, you might see a bit of the sort of fig, white fig, those sort of characteristics, and also a bit more floral, I think. Now, so that's what we'd expect. The other thing that will help you determine which one's which is that the Chablis, and I think Danny would mention this, the Chablis, and I would imagine, I'm guessing now, the Italian wines see no oak, or if they do, it would be very old oak. I think the Chablis would see no oak, and I think the Italian one would probably see no oak as either. However, the Ooh La La, we barrel ferment that in 100% in new oak, and then we mature it in a very small amount of new oak, but the new oak in the fermentation does give it that sort of lushness. So that being said, I think we should, after my 20-minute introduction, we should taste the wines. I think they're probably warm enough now. So what I'm going to do is I'd like you to go one by one, taste the wines, write some notes, and then I am going to pick on people and ask them to talk about them. How's about that?
Let's do that.
Let's do that. All right. Okay, let us begin.
No point asking this, I know what the order is.
Okay, cool.
Some had to.
Mm. Definitely what you're going to have to do is the first wine of the day, you have to calibrate.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so as you go through, just go back a bit, because the first wine is going to always taste pretty hard. And then you'll come back to it and it'll sort of taste quite different.
Second one. Maybe open that one. Can't smell anything. I'm not real good at that.
Wow, that's interesting. You sure I pulled the order?
I don't think. That
ain't right.
I wasn't going to call you out on it.
Yeah, no, that's wrong.
Because it's,
Yeah. Oh, actually.
oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, that's
yeah.
my order's incorrect.
Yeah, no, so my order's correct. So my order's correct. Yeah. No, I just thought, Jesus, I thought, oh no, hold on. Oh, no.
That's the correct order.
Oh, that's correct. Okay. Okay. That's better.
Professionals here. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm a bit of a speed taster, so don't worry about me. As you can imagine, I have to taste maybe 50 or 60 wines in the morning. So obviously I'm tasting a bit quickly. So I don't expect. Yeah, we'll put it out.
Yeah, so if anyone would like to unmute themselves, and we'll see.
Well, or actually, if there's any questions to start off with, just some general questions, we can start with that while everyone catches up, perhaps. If you like to just want to stick something in the chat box or put your hand up, I think there's a little, you can put your hand up thing and we can unmute you and just ask the question by your dulcet tones. That could work. Good. Steffi.
1 second.
Steffi there.
Yep. Who's put their hand up?
Someone put their hand up. If someone's put their hand up, just unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah, go for it.
Is wine number 2 the Italian?
Well, you're jumping the gun here, though, but I like your enthusiasm. So what we're going to do is we're going to sort of get to that. What we'll do is it could be, but I don't think so. But there's a reason why I don't think so. But I like your thinking, though. It could be, but I like your thinking. All right. Well, let's ask you. Why do you think it is the Italian?
There was a ripeness in the glass on the nose, and that's what made me think of it.
So when you say ripeness, do you think it's ripe, or, rich and ripe, or is it less ripe than some of the others? So is it more green or is it more fleshy, white, red? Is it more tropical or more yellow fruit?
Tropical would be my estimate of it.
Okay, so that's interesting, because if you think where the Italian wine is, it's right up in the Alps, so you'd expect that would be quite cool. So my thought would be looking for higher acidity and greener fruit. So that's how I would determine the Italian and the Chablis. The one that is, which is the one that is the ripest, would probably be the Ooh La La, is the way I look at it. So the one which is the roundest, the most yellow fruited, that would probably be the Ooh La La, is my guess. And the one that has, probably the one that looks the most, the two that looks most acidic or most linear, that's another word that we tend to use, we would say that they could either be the Chablis or the Italian. And the way I would determine between those two would be which one is more saline, because the one that tastes more saline, more like the sea, is more likely to be the Chablis. So I would do it by deduction, by elimination. So that's how I mean, to be honest, this is somewhat of a party trick, you know, like, so it's kind of not as important as, you know, people make out. It's often this idea of guessing a wine. I even when we're doing, you know, WSET diplomas and things like that, so high level of wine education, there's not that many marks for getting it exactly right.
Just 2 out of 30.
Yeah, so most of the marks are given for what I describe, which is a logical process of diagnosis. You know, it's like going through it and going, well, is it likely to be X? Well, probably not because of that, you know, but this one may more likely be that because blah, blah, blah. That's how you kind of do it. But that's a skill that takes a bit of time, doesn't it?
It does. It takes a bit of time, but I think that a lot of people put themselves down quite a bit with their palates. For sure. Like 98% of people have good palates. It's like everyone's got a muscle. You just got to work it out. You've got to give it some time. You've got to work it out. You've got to put some time into it. And what that does is it means it builds your palate over time.
And also you have to have experiences. I think that's the other thing, you know, one of the biggest thing is, like what we're doing today, we're looking at, you know, 8 wines which are significantly different to each other, and they each have their story about, you know, the place they're from. And we've chosen wine, I should say, Daniel's chosen very well, wines which are quite reflective of a place. I think the philosophy of the winemakers have been very much about letting the place shine through, and I think that is, you know, evident in this flight of wine for me anyway.
Especially with Chardonnay, because it's so versatile. You can pretty much plant it anywhere. You can grow grapes for making wine.
Well, it's a bit like Shiraz. I mean, in a way, Chardonnay is very much in the same ilk as Shiraz, in that it's grown in lots of places around the world, in lots of different climates, on lots of different soils. It's extremely versatile in its ability to grow. I'm not suggesting that all of the places that it's grown is great, because it's not. But, you know, in a lot of places, it will make really interesting and legitimate styles of wine. So, and I think what we're looking at, this tree here, definitely show that. If Steffi's out there, would you like to unmute yourself, Steph? Steffi, and tell us what you thought of wine 1. Steffi there?
I'm Steffi's sister.
I thought I saw her come up. Maybe not.
No.
All right. What about you, Cheryl? I can see your name up here. Do you want to unmute?
Or does Adam want to?
Or anyone
talk? Because Adam's unmuted himself.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Okay, guys. So number 1, I thought had a lot of acid. So I felt that's what you said, that could be the Italian one, because that's quite high. Certainly I didn't feel there was any oak in it, so I'm like, it's Italian or it's the Chablis. I can't really tell, I have to admit. In the end, I'm probably starting to think I'm leaning towards Chablis, which would be the double blind. You put it down as number 1 and then put it as number 3. Yes. And I'm trying to work out whether personality-wise you're a smart ass. Is it Daniel? Did you do all that? But that's sort of where my mind was on for number 1.
Yeah, I can see. And you know what? When I put that first in my mouth too, I thought, far out, that's got some wicked acidity. And I thought, whoa. That's why I actually said,
let's be careful. It's first one.
The first one of the day. You just said, whoa, that's really, woken up my taste buds. But then what happened was I actually went through and had a look at the others. And in fact, the others are actually even more acid. So it's actually quite interesting for me. That first wine is definitely got plenty of acid. So that suggests to me it is a cool climate. There's no doubt. So as I said before, we're already looking at cool climate. It's like cool, bit cooler, and even colder. So it's like there's no big wines from the Barossa or something like that. So they're all going to be acid. The first wine for me is quite, there's something else about this wine. There's a little richness in this wine, which I don't see in the others.
There's more than just fruit.
Yeah, there's a little bit more. That's my thinking when I started to wonder about, is there a bit of oak in this wine? And I think even though the oak isn't a massive component, it's not oaky, but there's a richness that wine has that perhaps we don't see in some of the others. Or the other two. so that's kind of how I was thinking, but I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Actually, what we should ask you about, how did we generally like this wine? I mean, did we like the first wine that we tried? What was your thoughts, Adam? Not. Did you like it, or did you find it a bit austere, or?
Yeah, look, I pretty like number 2 and 3.
You like 2 and 3 better. Okay. What about you, Dave? Collins?
Yeah. I did like number 1. I liked it more as we've gone on. I liked it less at first. When I first poured it, I actually did see that oak, and I thought it was actually a little bit
disjointed.
Yeah, it was like the oak was there a little bit, and I noticed there was some other flavors, but now it's in the set in the glass, it's probably warmed up a little bit. Yeah, I like number 1 quite a lot now.
It's interesting, that one of the things that, and I agree with you, like when I first put that in my mouth, I went, whoa, there's so much acid, and I see the oak, and it's a little bit disjointed for me. But as the wine, as I was saying before, as the wine warms up, it actually starts to kind of fit back together again. For me, this looks very young. That's the other thing. I think it looks juvenile. It looks like a wine that needs time as well. So, but definitely, I think that it's in a place now that it needs to grow into its shape. But I think it's got some lovely fruit density, and it's got some nice use of it. But yeah, good. Let's have a think about number 2. Who would like to talk about number 2? So we're going to pick someone. Gillian? I recognise you there. How are you? No, you're not. We'd better unmute Gillian.
Yeah, I'm going to ask for mute.
Yes, there we go. You're unmuted. No, she's not.
I can only ask her. She has to do it herself.
You have to unmute yourself, Gillian.
I don't have that power.
I'm doing that.
That's it. Hooray. How are you?
Yeah, good. Very well, thank you. I might be right off track, but I thought number 2 was the more aromatic and less bone fruit. So I was thinking that was the warmer climate out of the 3 of them.
I do think it's quite aromatic, for sure. And for me, there's a beautiful sort of, but hard to describe. I mean, this is the thing about
the note from the mallow. You get a little bit of that yogurt, a little bit on the back end.
A bit of yogurt and a bit of that sort of lactic character. For me, I see a bit more of the seashell character. Right. That's my gut feeling, that we really ought to know what these wines are. Oh, I don't. Oh my God.
You're blind.
I'm blind. Daniel isn't. So this will be interesting because I'm going to look like an idiot. But anyway, so I should just agree with him. But for me, I don't see so much of the yogurt, but for me, I'm seeing more of a sort of sea character. But the acidity is very high on this one, I feel. Yeah. It's really high. It tastes pretty cool. And what I was imagining also was that I can't. For me, it's harder for me to see any distinct fruit, more citrus if anything, and not too much fruit.
I didn't find much in the way of like green fruit or even stone fruit. It's pretty citrus and a bit of green.
Yeah, so it's
I
nice.
got a blossom off it. It's from everything on the ballot.
Sorry, what was that, Julian?
I got a little bit of sort of honey blossom.
Oh, yeah, floral.
Flower.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's a white flower thing for me. There's a distinct sort of honeysuckle or some sort of white floral, but quite subdued. Yeah, it's nice. I quite like that one. And what was our general? Anyone else like it? Was it well liked in general? Yeah, you can do your thumbs up if you like, and we can have a look at that on the screen. Okay. So, what about the third one? Who's out there who would like to talk about the third one? Gosh, no one. Why don't we? I can't see everyone, so you're going to have to just pick someone.
You're going to have to pick someone. No, that might be a little bit cruel, isn't it? It's cruel to be kind.
What about Cheryl? What about you, Cheryl? Why don't you tell us? You've had a preview to these wines already.
I was going to say after my embarrassing. I got 1 out of 12 by the on Saturday. The first one, the one I was going to sort of comment on, the mineral-y thing that you mentioned the other day. So, but then I found the next one has a little bit of wood, as you sort of said. Process of elimination, I would have gone 1, 2, 3 as they are, which would be the
right.
But I did fail disbelief.
I tell you what, it isn't as easy as it was the other day. I must admit, must be not a fruit day or whatever it is on the biodynamic calendar. I actually was pretty good on the weekend, and I actually was I was thinking I was pretty hot. I got 12 out of 12, but I'm really struggling today a bit more.
I think we should do a review for everybody.
Well, we should finish talking about this last one. So I mean, my it's quite, for me again, it's quite neutral in the aromatics for me, but it's quite high in acid as well.
Quite high, very high in acidity, I find, especially it really pings on the fruit palate. You can feel a bit like some lemon.
And also, for me, this one tastes like stones. Like really stony and minerally. Very, very little fruit. So if I was going to guess, I would have thought the first one being with the oak would be the Yarra. The second one, because of the sea character, perhaps the Chablis, and the last one being the most neutral, being Italian, would be would be my guess. Were you going to tell us?
Yes.
You're going to tell us. Go on.
Wine number 1 is Yarra.
Okay. So that's 2021. So that's the other little clue that I had, was that it tasted outrageous. Or is it 2021 or
2021?
Yeah, 2021. So it's outrageously young. That is fresh wine, and that for me is that sort of real zinginess that you've got, but you can still see that oak. And as I was sort of talking to Dave, I don't want to talk to you all, but when Dave was mentioning the oak, that oak integration will come with a little bit more time, but also what you're going to find is that as it warms up, also that everything gets together a bit better. So the second one is the Chablis. I think that's quite, look, to be honest, this is Petit Chablis. It's not $38. It's not outrageously expensive for Chablis wine. And you can go out in the shops and probably find it for $25, $26. It's actually Indra's. This tells you that students aren't the same as they used to be. And Indra, my eldest daughter, this is her go-to white wine in summer. I'm sure that when I was a student, we had $68 pots of beer. I certainly wasn't drinking, Chablis. So I think things have changed a little bit, but I think you can find that it's not a bad wine for the price, I think. And then the last wine, perhaps for me, the least interesting. It's a little bit too neutral for my taste in Chardonnay. Yeah, well, there you go. I suppose that's why the Italians aren't famous for their Chardonnay. So that's my gut feeling.
They have a couple of readings, don't they? But it's a lot of it is in Alto-Adige, making these much like your leaner, slightly more neutral styles. But as we work and go to the next flights, I think we're going to start.
I think there'll be a step up. I think
a step up.
Yeah, well, you bloody well hope so. But one of these ones is 195. All right, so we're going to move on to the flight 2. So flight 2, so that is going to be wines 4 and 5. So just tip out your wine. Don't put any water in your glass, and just put
Chardonnay on Chardonnay,
the water. So let's have a look at these, shall we? 4 and 5. So any general comments that you want to, or any questions you want to just pop them in the comments, and we can answer them.
Yeah, then I can raise them with Ray. Okay, so.
Whoa, that's good. Oh, that's good too. Yeah, that's excellent. Well, that puts a smile on my face. Those wines, both of us, look really good. So what I would like to do is talk briefly about the two wines. I don't think they're, whatever order they're in, but so we're looking at a Puligny Montrachet Olivier Leflaive. So Olivier Leflaive is one of my favourite producers in Burgundy. They have some really nice holdings in Puligny and Chassagne, Montrachet. Now, I think Daniel can show us a bit more close up the vineyards of Puligny, and the next interesting village is also they're called Meursault. So he's highlighting Beaune, which is the centre of Burgundy, of the Côte d'Or, and north of Beaune. So that's moving up the page. That is red wine country, and south of Beaune is well, actually not quite true, but there's a couple of villages just directly south of Beaune called Pommard and Volnay, which are red. But then after that, you're really into Meursault, and then Puligny Montrachet, and then some Montrachet, etc., etc. So basically, we're looking at a wine from Puligny Montrachet, and it's a really beautiful village. Some really, I don't know how many of you've been there, but there's an awesome restaurant there, and surprise, surprise, they have some excellent wines in the restaurant. But the vineyard's really beautiful. You can see the village vineyards are marked in green, and as you can see, the village itself, which is where Daniel's put the yellow marker, that is the actual houses, and around that is the village vineyard, and we're looking at a village level wine. And then if you look where the Premier Cru is, that is right at the top of the village, and you can see right at the top is a green patch, and that is woods. And so the vineyards so Premier Cru is on the middle slope, but sort of middle top slope of the vineyards. But then the Grand Cru is actually that orange section that's right in the middle slope, and it is actually super beautiful layering of red and red clay and limestone.
It's one of the keys to the Burgundy vineyards when you're looking at the different cru levels. It's all about that middle slope, because if I zoom out a little bit, what you can see is rolling throughout Burgundy is this escarpment running from north to south, and what that does is that actually shields from the winds coming over. And also, because of the geology in that middle slope, as the escarpment's been raised or carved out, it means that it's exposed those particular soil types which are the best. They get the best drainage, they warm up at the right time of year, they cool down at the right time of year. So it's in that middle slope where we find the best vineyard sites, and this is very small territory. We're talking the size of a few football fields.
Yeah, it's really small. And the other thing about the middle slope is that there's quite a lot of variation in the middle slope too. So there are Grand Cru vineyards in the middle slope, and there's also Premier Cru vineyards, pretty good sites, but not quite Grand Cru. But still, you know, when you're looking at Burgundy, one of the, you know, is happening now with the prices being the I mean, this is a village wine. It's nearly $200 a bottle.
Yes.
You know, there was a time where we could buy Grand Cru for $200 a bottle, and now that's impossible. You know, I think Grand Cru is now closer to $600 or $700 a bottle. So the thing about it is that those middle slope, those Premier Cru sites, they're similar. They're similar climatically. So there's not much difference climatically, but the soils can be just either a little bit richer, maybe have a bit more clay, and sometimes they have a little bit too much limestone, so they're a little bit leaner. So one of the things which differentiates the Grand Cru sites to the Premier Cru sites is actually this Goldilocks amount of clay and limestone. And that being said, there are some politics being played, obviously, when they drew up these lines. And so, for instance, Meursault doesn't actually have a Grand Cru. They obviously weren't influential enough. When
they claimed it was by choice when I was at tasting once.
Yeah, like hell.
It's like bullshit.
Yeah. However, that being said, there we will be tasting in the next flight a Premier Cru Meursault from Perrières. And Perrières, there's actually vineyards in Puligny as well as there are vineyards in Meursault, and they actually are quite close together. I think
I'll give you an idea. That's where the Premier Cru site is, where all those little dots are in the yellow there.
Maybe zoom in a little bit so that we can have a better look.
So it's almost in the same place, pretty much.
So
but it's not. That's the crucial thing.
So these so you can circle it. Those circled there, they're actually the Premier Cru vineyards in Meursault, and they are on the middle slope. But because and actually, to be honest, they're quite similar to the Premier Cru in Puligny. But in fact, I think, in my opinion, they're sometimes really quite delicious.
When we talk about the Meursault, we'll get into that in a bit more detail because it's really interesting.
Anyway, let's have a look at these two ones. I've just, again, given it a bit more time while I'm talking so that the wines warm up a bit. So let's have a look at the first wine. So what we're looking at, the two wines here, one is the Olivier Leflaive Puligny Montrachet village wine, level wine, and the other one is the 2019 Bartl, which you guys will know is from our vineyard just behind our house. It's tended with love and devotion by Stefan Bartl. Many of you may have seen him around the traps. He's a massive German guy who's been my friend for 25 years. And his wife wouldn't let him have a vineyard, so he comes and plays on mine. And he ends up having his own block, which because he comes down once or twice a week and looks after that block. It's very, very cute, actually. And it's the most interesting. You can tell where Steph has been because it's very Teutonic. Every shoot is in the right position. Every leaf is turned the right way. It's very very Germanic. While the rest of my vineyard looks much more well, I wouldn't say laissez-faire, but just a little bit more artistic. Let's put it that way. So Steph has been looking after that since we planted it, which was over 15 years ago. So this is a 15-year-old vineyard. It's at its peak of its production for me. It's got to the point where all of that little the idiosyncratic nature of young vines is well and truly behind it. So we didn't actually take fruit from it till year 10. So that's quite unusual. Most people wait about 5 years. We waited nearly 10 years. I think we might have taken a little bit in year 9, but yeah, 10 years before we took any fruit. So so that is 19, and we're going to compare that with Olivier Leflaive 18, and we shall see how they are. So let's taste the wine. So the Bartl is on sort of sandy loam and sort of what is it? Red clay, and then basalt, and then limestone. So maybe we can see that. What we would expect to see is the Meursault, sorry, the Puligny will be a little bit leaner than the Geelong wine. You'd expect a bit more stone fruit in the Geelong wine, and perhaps a little bit more of that oatmeal, melon, fig, citrus characters in the French wine. So let's see if we can determine which one's which. So that's a bit easier today. That's interesting. That's super interesting. The other thing that you will notice about the French wine is that it will have a little bit more, this is in both wines, but probably more in the Puligny. There's perhaps a little bit more of this struck match character, this slight sulfide reduction, which I find extremely interesting and complexing. They're in both wines, but definitely in the Puligny.
And also, the difference in colour, I know that's not part of the palate, but you can see that straight off the first pour.
Now, this might help you with the clues a little bit as well. Actually, let's just do a vote, actually, because we've only got 2 wines. We can probably do this. Who liked the first wine as their favourite wine, and who likes the second one as their favourite wine? Just who liked the first one? Put your hands up. Can we?
We can scroll.
We can scroll through. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
A few people
on not showing their faces.
Struggling a bit.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, it seems pretty well liked. And who liked the second wine?
Wine number 2.
Okay.
2, 3.
Not quite as many. Yeah. Well, sort of. Yeah, not quite as many, perhaps. It's a bit hard on the Zoom one. Anyway, let's start. Who wants to talk about first wine? Someone who liked it, preferably. I think it's a really nice wine. So, anyone want to pop their hand up, or just unmute themselves and go for it? No. Okay. Everyone's really shy. Here we go. Here we go. Who we got?
It's beautiful on the nose. It's rich. It's got honey on the palate. It's delightful.
Yeah, I do think it's got this incredible balance between intense flavour. Like the flavour is pretty full on, but it's not easy to determine what the flavour is. It's just there's a lot of it, which I think is an excellent description of a great wine, because what you want is actually to have that level of intrigue that it's hard to know what you're tasting exactly. So you have to keep coming back to your glass. But on the other hand, there's this complexity, but there's also this incredible power. But it's refined as well. There's a really beautiful refinement to this wine. It's lovely high acidity. It's not fat. It's still got lovely bones in this wine. There's good structure. It's just got a lot more. Well, it's got a lot of flavour as well, which is kind of cool. I guess
like smokiness as well.
Yeah, there is a smokiness. There's definitely.
It's not overwhelming. Again, it's integration.
It's interesting. This one actually, to me, has this sort of this. I don't know. It's this oatmeal character. It's kind of like porridge. Actually, it's kind of weird. That's yum. Who's going to speak to the second wine? Because the second wine's pretty delicious too. Dave, go for it.
Not a heap. I like them both. The second one I thought I'm a bit of a sucker for that struck match flinty character.
Yeah,
it's had its shades, I thought, so I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, nice.
Even though I thought the first one might be more balanced overall, I just couldn't get past that in the second. And slight spiciness to it too. The flavors floral. And, yeah, I thought the second one was quite interesting. Really liked it.
Yeah, super good wine. I mean, I think they're both really lovely wines.
The finish, the subtleness, but also like it's rich but subtle on the finish of the second wine. It just keeps going and going and going.
That sulphide is, I'm a bit of a sucker for it too. I have to keep telling myself that one of the things about that sulphide character, it actually can be a little bit masking of other things. And so even though I really like it, which I really do, you've got to say, what else is there? But one of the things I'm very happy with both of these, they're young wines. And what happens with time, that especially with that sulphide character, it actually becomes a complexing character as the wine ages. So maybe in 4 or 5 years' time, we'll look at this wine and go, actually, that's really amazing. You know, like that overtness of that sort of struck match will become much less prominent, and you'll just have it as this really underlying complexing component. While the first one for me seems much more like it'll age probably for 20 years, but even at this point, it's got a different balance point where most of the things are kind of more even. Yeah, correct. Wow.
Can I ask
All right.
how you think wine number 4 will age?
I think it'll age incredibly well. With that level of acidity and that amount of power of flavour, it'll just last.
Both these wines are built to last.
There's no doubt in my mind that there's 15, 20 years ahead of this one.
Especially one of these.
That's really big. Like the flavour for me is big. So does it get bigger or does it reduce over time? Does it get more subtle?
It becomes more subtle. So it's like, but it's never going to be a little wine. It's never going to, you see, that's one of the things with aging, especially with white wines, is you've got to have, it's again, this Goldilocks thing, you know, you don't want to be too big because they tend to sort of always look a bit cumbersome even as they age. But there's got to be if there's enough power and enough of it, that as it ages, the fruit diminishes and there's enough acidity to hold the line, it'll actually still be super complex as it ages. But it will probably, no, actually they both will age about the same. The second wine, for me, has a lot more time. It needs a lot more time initially because a lot of the interesting flavours in that wine are still developing. You know, I think that they will show maybe 2 or 3 years from now, we'll see that in more of its glory. Well, I think the first wine is showing more now, but I think what will happen over time is that they will both kind of progress and then they will both come together. The second one will rich up and the first one will lean out. So that's my feeling.
Yes, and I suppose it's also worth noting and saying that when you taste the wine after you've swilled it and you've drank the wine, just count to 10 and see if the flavour's still there after 10 seconds or if it continues way after that. You'll find both these wines, they have long finishes, and that is a sign of quality in any wine, is that you can, and ageability, exactly, because the wine can sustain itself. Because the wine might be quite subtle in flavour, but if that subtle flavour persists on the palate, that means that it can age.
So I'm counting 20 seconds and on the wine too, and that's still that's going. And then if I look at wine 1, wow, that's a long term.
Always helps to breathe out through your nose as well.
Yeah, so that's still over 20 seconds as well.
Oh, yeah, I thought it was going away and then it just came back.
Yeah, then it just came back. It's super interesting because if you think about the size, the amplitude of flavour, the amplitude of flavour is bigger on the first one, but the length sort of is about the same.
About the same, yes.
Yeah, so it sort of goes like that. And then the other one starts a bit lower, but it still stays kind of the same at the end. It's very, very cool. I think they're both really good wines.
Gents, just a quick question. I may have made a rookie mistake and switched my wines around while I was checking the colour. The deeper colour, is that wine 4 or 5?
4.
Oh, I did too. Gotcha.
No, but that's the colour really stands out between these two wines.
So at least it's easy to. I mean, that first flight, if we switch them around the first flight, we were pretty stuck.
Correct.
So,
I wasn't cheating by asking that question because they are distinctly different
they're
colours. So
distinctly different colours. Yeah. So one is definitely the first wine is the darker colour.
It's a little bit more golden, whereas wine number 5 is more of that like medium lemon.
Now I know why that is. Who would have thought?
Also, right?
Who would have thought I would know how that was? So the reason is that I can reveal now. I'm fairly confident I am right. Am I right? The first wine, I'm going to look like an idiot if I'm wrong, but the first wine is the wine I made. I'm guessing I am right. I hope I am right. Daniel? The first one is actually Bartl. Okay, well, that's handy.
Correct.
So good. So that's the one I made, and I know that is had a lot of new oak, and it's had up to, well, it was 100% barrel fermented in new oak, and then it was matured for 15 months or maybe 13 months, 4 months in 50 to 80% new oak. So there's an outrageous amount of new oak in that wine, and oak. Surprise, surprise, actually colours the wine. And so you're seeing that yellow, that more yellow colour from the oak. While the Puligny Montrachet, I'm not sure how much new oak would it have, but it would have maybe 20%.
It's about 20%.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So it's about 20% new, and that would be part of the reason why the colour is lighter.
And Pauline, just an interesting point. She said, am I weird, or is there a salami/cured meat nose in the first one, or is it sulphur as well? There is a slight smokiness, which
I think that's right. For me, that's like that smoked prosciutto. I agree, and for me, smoked oyster or something maybe even. The reason why I think that is the oak that we tend to use. I mean, like many of you know, I go to France most years, not the last 2 years, and buy the wood out of the forest, and then I have my cooper make them. And the forest that I choose to use for Chardonnay predominantly is a forest, two forests, one called Tronchet and the other one called Juppy. The Tronchet forest gives you this spiciness, and often that spiciness you can see in some of the barrels that we use for Pinot, which is 100% Tronchet. Those always give you that sort of baking spice sort of character. And then the other forest, Juppy, always gives me this sort of white floral, that sort of, there's a flower in the UK that grows by the side of paths. What is it? White flower.
What white flower?
Like cowslip or something. I don't know one. I can't remember. There's a particular white meadow flower in the UK that I remember. It always always reminds me of that. But anyway, that's that forest as well. So we also use quite light toast, so you don't see much of that sort of bacon character in our wines. And in the Puligny, I think that part of that smoky sulfide character that we notice in that wine is also to do with the slightly higher toast smoky barrels that they have. Good. Good, excellent. So
I would just like to point out a rather awkward, unfortunate thing is that unfortunately the Bartl, the 19 that you're tasting right now, we actually have sold out of the wine, and it was. Oh
yeah, I forgot. So what happened?
It's my fault.
Well, it's not. It was kind of it was kind of Daniel's fault, and it was kind of my fault because the wine was much too popular at the Saturday tasting, and we had hoped that we were going to hold some for you guys, but that's Daniel's fault. He sold it. So I'm so sorry.
We believed that we had some more, and it had been mislabeled in the shed.
Yes.
All I can do is apologise. I'm really sorry.
But it was probably the wine of the tasting last week. So it was pretty good. But I think that looked pretty good too.
All right.
But never fear, we are actually we do get to make it most years. So we're actually we did taste this 21, and I just put the blend together today. So we would have that out for hopefully in October. And is there some? No, there's no 20, is there?
There is no 20.
Yeah, so we'll have to wait for 21.
But that's 21.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
That was quick.
Excellent. So do we have any questions about these two wines? Nope. Everyone good? Any questions come up on the debug?
We were just some comments like looking forward to the bar in 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it
would have as well.
It would have been nice. Look, we literally have nothing. I had to actually, I had to talk to Sweet Talk Stefan into it, because he, as part of his deal, he gets the first wines that come off the line and go straight into his cellar. And I actually begged him on Tuesday if he could give me 6 bottles for our museum, because it was too sad that I didn't have any of this wine to even have in my museum, because we didn't have any left. So so he thankfully gave me 6 bottles back. So hopefully one of these days we'll do another tasting and we can at least taste it again with a bit more age. Good.
Okay.
Right. All good? All questions done?
All questions done. I can move on to flight 3.
All right. Well, this is an exciting flight because we're looking at 3 wines here. The ages are quite different. So this is interesting, Dale.
Well, it's blind. That's when we can talk about colour. And how, well, cool. Which one do we think is going to be the older wine?
Yeah, all right. Well, let's pour them out. So wine 6 first. So what do we got? We've got a Meursault Premier Cru, Perrières. But in my opinion, if Meursault was ever going to have a Grand Cru, this one and another vineyard called Geneviève probably would be the 2. In my opinion, actually, the Perrières and Geneviève are Marie's favourite white Burgundy vineyards, but generally we can't afford to drink it anymore. So I'm happy that we're doing this tasting today. So, and then we've got, and the producer's interesting. It's tell me a little bit about the producer, because it's not one that I have tended to drink. Yes. Only because I didn't know about it, actually.
Well, Lochardet is how I would pronounce it, and they are actually a family of German origin. Now, Burgundy itself and that part of Germany,
that part of France,
just in that particular latitude, has changed hands over many generations, particularly in the 19th century. And so what you find is a lot of osmosis. You'll find slightly German names in Burgundy, you'll find slightly French names over the border in Germany. This one in particular, they are of let's say German origin, about 3rd generation. They've been producing some pretty decent wines in Meursault, I found, and their style of Meursault is in itself, it shows the way in which Meursault shifted in particularly the last 5 years.
So what I mean, now I'm going to be the pejorative fixer. So what's the difference between Meursault? What is generally considered the difference between Meursault and Puligny?
Puligny, as we've just tasted, it has that slightly struck match character, that a little bit more stone fruit, but it was quite lean and quite subtle.
That's generally the way that's the way. I mean, like if I had 2 wines, from one that is most typically like Meursault and one that was most typically like Puligny, we would always see that Puligny was much more lean. Tends to have higher acidity, leaner, more minerally. And Meursault in general, because most of the Meursault vineyards are actually, it's down here. So that's the village there. So they're in an area which is a lot more clay, and therefore that gives it more power. And the struck match one can be a bit deceiving, because you can often have quite a lot of struck match in Meursault, because as much of that struck match character, as much as anything, is a winemaking thing. and producers like Koch Jury in Meursault are well known for that sort of real match character.
The Meursaults tend to also have a little bit more of a buttery character as well. That's one thing that you're looking out for, is that buttery note on the nose, which comes from the malolactic fermentation. What's
also interesting, though, is that, as Daniel sort of was suggesting, there's been a bit of a bleed in styles as well, especially on these vineyards that actually sort of go across the border. So often you will see like Meursault Perrières and Meursault, Puligny Perrières being more similar, and they're not that far apart. Do you have a picture?
Oh, here we are.
You do have a picture. Okay.
You can see the vineyards here.
Do you have the Meursault Perrières, the Meursault vineyard in there as well?
Oh, these are all
these are the
Meursault
Perrières. Okay, sorry. So but where's that in relationship to
Puligny? Right on the same slide.
So it's exactly, so you can see that there's an area which actually fundamentally is shared right on that border, and I believe this. I'm not sure, but when I taste this wine, I wouldn't be surprised if it tastes more like Puligny
than it actually does. Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Then we've got Oakridge. Now, this is made by a very dear friend of mine, Dave Bignell. Dave and I agree on a lot of things. We follow the same football team. We believe in the same politics, but we don't necessarily agree how we like making Chardonnay. Now, that being said, I love his Chardonnay. I just don't make it that way. And I think he's probably a little less complimentary about my Chardonnay, but he would never dream about making it my way. So I will tell you a little bit about the two Australian wines here. So the Oakridge 864, so that's the top of their tree of Chardonnays. Comes from two vineyards in the upper Yarra, so the coolest part of the Yarra Valley, but still significantly warmer than Geelong. They would pick, this is interesting, they pick maybe 3 weeks before us. However, they also pick at much, much lower potential alcohol. So if we picked, or if they picked when we would pick at the same alcohol level, say 13, they would be even earlier. They'd probably be 5 weeks. So that just gives you an idea of how much difference is in climate there is. The soil is very different. The Geelong wine is on like a quartz soil, lots of gravel, quartzy material, while the Yarra is on duplex sort of sandy loam. The big thing about the winemakers, so they picked the Allegra is picked much riper at it's around 13 and a bit potential alcohol, while the Oakridge we picked at probably around about 11.5 to 12. So that's number one. That's a big difference. The other one is that though we both use new oak and it's all done in oak, Dave tends to use about 20% or thereabouts of new oak in large format, so in 500 litre barrels. So the oak impact is relatively, it's there for sure, but it's not massive. The Allegra, on the other hand, sees 100% new oak for 18 months, or between 15 and 18 months. And the other thing about it is that it's 100% new, so 100% new for a long time. While Dave's, and it's small format, so 228, which is the traditional size in Burgundy. However, the big thing about our barrels, unlike the Burgundy ones, is that they tend to be again much less toasted, so you don't see that bacon fat, you see more of that white floral thing. The other thing about the two Australian wines that is distinctly different is that Dave in the Yarra will not allow the wine to go through malolactic fermentation. So that is the conversion of malic acid into lactic acid. That's because he wants to retain the high acidity of the wine, while we are at a cooler site and we're picking obviously later and in a cooler weather. And what happens there is that you actually retain natural acidity. In fact, if I didn't allow my wine to go through malolactic, it would actually taste like battery acid. So we allow it to go through malolactic. So you will actually have about a similar sort of acidity level. But the other thing about it is that the big difference is there's a creaminess perhaps in a wine goes through Malo, and that would be also true of the French wine. That's 100% through Malo. And obviously there's a big difference in age, but that's not a winemaking thing. But we're gonna see
two good reasons for the age. One, that it gives us an opportunity to actually see like Chardonnay when it's been developed as a Chardonnay when it's actually quite youthful. And thirdly, we really wanted to give you something special.
Well, this is true.
We only had 8 wines, and I had to get in something.
Yeah, but that's true.
And it is available.
Yeah, yeah. Though it breaks my heart to make it available, but anyway. So, but nonetheless, so we're looking at the Allegra here is from a vineyard that was planted in 1968, 69. It was it's the oldest Chardonnay vineyard in Geelong, if not Victoria, that's still making a single wine, which is kind of cool. The other thing about it is that in my opinion, it just ages incredibly well. So you'll be looking at a wine here, one of these 3 wines is 12 years old. And, I think when you look at them and try to concentrate on this, look at freshness. There's one wine, don't worry about the color or don't worry about anything else. Just think about how fresh this, how fresh these wines are. And then, you may be surprised which one is actually the oldest wine. Good. So with all that spiel, we should talk. We should taste. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to take us into wine number 1? Who really likes it?
Hold on, I haven't even tasted it, man.
You tasted one. No takers.
Are you guys allowed to tell us the age of the Allegra, or is that cheating?
2010.
2010. So do you guys not on your notes have...
it might have been missing from my apologies.
Okay,
that's my
so
fault.
the Premier Cru Meursault is 2017, the Oakridge is 19, and the Allegra is 10. Wow. Whoa.
Well, essentially.
Yeah. Does anyone want to talk about number 1? All right, here we go. Jeff.
Yeah, I really found that oak, quite forward. It's sort of high acidity in that.
Yeah,
really high acidity. So I'm thinking it's probably it doesn't matter what it is, but it's probably the younger wine. It's going to be very good in time. Having had the 2014 before, but yeah, when you compare it to maybe the last wine with that oak characteristics being far more balanced, you can sort of start to think which one might be the younger and which one might be the older. But
yeah, it's phenomenal that it's a very interesting wine. It's hard to pinpoint fruit flavour definitely on the first wine.
Yeah, you want to give it a few years, you can tell it's got the potential, but.
Well, I actually bought a dozen extra of these wines, so I've got them sitting in my cellar. So hopefully, in a bit of time, we'll get to see them over a long spell and see how they develop. So maybe when we do this Chardonnay tasting in a few years' time, I'll pull one of them out and we can have a look at a 10-year version of that, which would be kind of cool. But yeah, definitely the acidity and the power of it. Yeah, but though you can't describe a fruit, I can't describe fruit so much, but what I do see is there is flavour and there is presence and power. So, I think that bodes well for the future. Then wine. Wine 2, anyone for wine 2? Wine 2 is pretty good.
I'm going out on a limb and suggesting that's your wine, Ray. It's the age, the colour gives a little bit away with the age, but certainly I can get the mallow with the creaminess of that wine. It's got a complexity of flavour and many more years left in the bottle. Absolutely.
Yeah, I know, it's phenomenally fresh. Yeah, it's very fresh. But I agree with you. For me, there's a lovely balance between sort of like a white stone fruit, nectarine. There's melon, fig. It's quite complex. And then on top of that, there's this sort of these other sort of
vanillin,
floral. There's a little bit of oak. I can definitely see some oak, but that's complemented with this creamy sort of character. Not so much buttery for me, but more that sort of like fresh cream. Which I really like that. I hope that is my one.
If it is the Allegra, then it's very powerful.
Yeah, definitely.
With that amount of age, for it still to be that powerful. Yeah, if it is the Allegra, then that would be very powerful for a wine of 12 years. Yeah.
It's
you were expecting all the wine to have mellowed out a little.
It's interesting because it is quite a big wine, like it's massive, but then it doesn't feel cumbersome in my mouth, which is good.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, so it's almost quite if you're tasting that blind, it is actually quite confusing because it has that freshness and power. But also with the flavor profile, the colour might suggest it's got more age on it, but the power and freshness would suggest that it wasn't as old as 2010. So it would confuse me. So is it 2010?
Is it 2017? Is that the Meursault?
I don't know, man.
Oh, right.
Well, I don't.
No, you know, I don't. I'm not 100% sure now when I think about it. Well, let's have a look at number 3.
Oh, sorry.
There's something about number 3 that makes me think. Wow. That's got some acid. There you go. I like it.
And then suddenly just wait for that mallow to finish.
Yeah, bang.
You breathe out.
That's pretty good. Anyone want to chat about that one? No one? Oh, here we go.
It tastes young.
Young, yeah.
Like a real tightness compared to the other two. I just think it's really tight in the glass. And all I'm tasting is a lot of acid at the front.
Yeah, it's pretty acid, but it's interesting. You can see that struck match character again on this one, which is interesting. It's got a lot of power though. It's powerful, but it's not mellowed yet. And I think that for me suggests to me that that's pretty young wine, but also that it's got a long way to go. It's another one that's got a long time in the glass.
Again, the finish is still going.
It's long.
Still going.
Yeah, it's super long. But it's kind of it's a little bit austere at this point to me.
For a Meursault.
Is it a Meursault? Oh, you just.
No, you're around right now.
Jesus Christ.
Or is it for the Oakridge? Eh?
That's definitely not the Oakridge. The reason why I'm going to go out on a limb. So I don't think it's the Oakridge because it's got a different fruit characteristic. There's fruit in this one when the Oakridge tends to be more lean.
The Oakridge would definitely be more citrusy.
And it's got malo, which is definitely got malo. It's got some, yes, it can't be Oakridge from that, but it's high acid. So I think that I would guess that the Allegra is the middle one, the Oakridge is the first one, and the Meursault is the last one. Is my guess. The reasoning, which I'll get my 20 points for. The reasoning I'm guessing is that the first one it's young and it tastes to me like it was picked with not a lot of flavour. So there's a lot of more greener flavours and less. There's very little stone fruit or any floral, real flavour, fruit flavours. But it's a very interesting one. But it's got a lot of power. So it suggests to me really good vineyards, really high chance of aging well, no malolactic. So that's kind of my Oakridge thinking. I'm with Stuart, I think, who was saying that the second wine's Allegra, because it is a richer wine, but it's still got incredible sort of finesse and acidity. I could have easily thought that was the Meursault, but then I saw what I think is the Meursault because of the higher level of acidity, miles of acid in that sort of, so more in that Puligny style, actually, going back to what we were talking about before.
It would be very Puligny.
And young, and young. So that is my guess. How right?
Dave, before he left, unfortunately, I'll send the results to him when by email when we finish.
Yeah, what did Dave say?
He said he was down for number 6 was the Meursault, 7 was Allegra, so along with you, 8 was Oakridge, and a couple of the people in the chat have agreed with him. So definitely, all are agreeing on that one. But
so everyone thought that the middle one was Allegra. Or more or less, yeah. Okay, that's good.
But they're disagreeing with you on the Oakridge versus
okay. Well, worth another look.
Does anyone think differently to Ray?
Well, does anyone think the same as me? Oh man, now I'm getting confused, because the other thing that often makes me one of the things that also makes me think about Oakridge, Dave loves struck match. He loves that sulphide character, and for me, there's a bit more in the third one. Nah, I'm going to stick with my guns. Yeah, I'm good with it. So the first one is, in my opinion, Oakridge.
Yes.
All right. So Allegra
is the middle. Everyone is
okay. So I'm good. So yeah,
Meursault is number 3.
So there we go. That was interesting. so what's our thoughts on this wine? This group of wines, perhaps the 8 wines. What was the favourite across the board? Did anyone have some standout across the 3 flights that they went? Yeah, that's pretty cool. Like that. Or was there a lot of wines that were interesting to you?
I happen to have the 2010 Allegra over Christmas, and I was very happy to have it again. It's a very nice wine. Nothing like a 12-year-old Chardonnay that's aged beautifully. So
it's really interesting to see how those tertiary flavours develop, isn't it?
It's interesting, Jeff. I had a 2010 for Christmas as well. So we had one of those on Christmas Day. It tasted bloody good too.
I had it by myself while my wife had COVID in lockdown, so it tasted good.
Oh my Lord. Oh, interesting. Well, no, I had my little bout with COVID after.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Good. Anyone else? Anyone else had sort of one that they wanted to, over the 3 flights that was particularly interesting?
Susan said that she really the Bartl.
Yeah, I like
the Bartl. The Bartl was exceptional.
Yeah, it's a cracker actually. I mean, didn't want to talk it up too much because we haven't got any, but it
says a lot though, doesn't it? Especially when we're looking at the price. When you look at Burgundy, you look at how that Bartl stands up.
Yeah, it's bloody good actually. Yes. What I'm really liking about that Bartl is that there's that real, there's a real density of flavour, but it's paired back by that lovely acidity. I mean, I'll tell you another little thing. So the Allegra vineyard at Mount Dunedin, and for some, for those of you that are in Geelong, that vineyard is getting encroached on by housing development all around it. And my expectation is that in the next sort of 5-6 years or so, maybe 10, we will be unable to farm it for 2 reasons. One, the council will rate us out of existence, and the second thing is that as people get closer to vineyards, they don't like you waking up at 6 o'clock and starting the tractor up and spraying. Even if you're spraying milk, they don't want the tractor driving around. So we have found that in the past that's another thing. People start to complain to the council, puts lots of pressure on it. So where I was getting to was that we're probably going to lose that vineyard, the next 5 or 6 years, and in that we sort of hope that the Bartl will be split into 2 components, so that perhaps Allegra will become a barrel selection out of the Bartl. And I mean, if we could do that, I'd be, pretty happy with that.
It seems like a perfectly good candidate.
Yeah, so that's a possibility. So, maybe we'll get a few more vintages out of Allegra, but then, we'll see where we go. So, any concluding remarks? Anybody else?
Just to say thank you. The selection was amazing. It was very thoughtful. I thought it was very considerate how you tried to match the Lethbridge wine. So just a thank you.
Thank you. No, and I must actually thank Daniel for it, because I've really not. I really want to make this part of the sort of his role, is to actually go out there and choose wines that I don't know necessarily and put it together in a way that is interesting, not only for you guys, but also for me, so that I'm actually, on Saturday was the first time I actually saw the wines. Obviously, I've seen the Lethbridge wines before, but, I don't drink my wines very often. The number of bottles of my own wine I drink is very, very few. I wasn't really thinking about them at all. So it was nice to see them fresh like that, and then to see them in flights with comparable or interesting wines that I like the styles of. So, or stylistically similar to what we do.
Definitely, and I really hope that it's for some of you, if not all of you, it's giving you an opportunity to really get a better idea of how climate and how the terroir and how the winemaker affect how Chardonnay tastes in the glass, how it all comes together, and how it can be, the variety can be huge. Some people say anything but Chardonnay, but don't realise that Chardonnay, you can't just pin one sticker on it.
Well, the thing is, I think that there's no doubt in my mind, from a winemaking perspective, it's a little bit like Pinot. It shows its place, but it also shows the intention of the winemaker quite a lot as well. So it's got this beautiful, and that's why I think a lot of winemakers love making Chardonnay, because it actually, you can put your personality in it a little bit. But on top of that, it is very much a noble grape, so it has its intrinsic qualities.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why it spreads so far across the globe, because people can put their own stamp on it as well?
Well, 2 things. I think, one, the plant grows easy. So that's the other thing. It can handle many different climates. So that's one thing. But I think, people put their stamp on it. And also, I think, a lot of people would have, when the grapes were disseminated around the world, they'd have thought, well, what are the great white wines of the world? And Burgundy would have been one of them, so that, they said, well, I'm going to take some of those cuttings and plant them wherever and hope they work. So that's kind of my thinking as well.
I agree, guys. It was an amazing tasting put together, but it does showcase Lethbridge wines against the best in the world, and good quality. So kudos to you, Ray and the team. Amazing wines.
No, thank you. Look, the interesting thing about Chardonnay is that it was the last grape that we actually planted on the vineyard, and it was the last wine that I actually started making. It was interesting. When we planted the vineyard, we planted Pinot, Shiraz, and a little bit of Merlot, and that was our initial planting. And that was because I always thought that the thing that I would love making most was Pinot Noir, because my love was always red Burgundy, and Marie absolutely loved cool climate Shiraz, wines from in those days it was Craigley and Bannockburn in Australia that we particularly liked, and then there was always the Northern Rhone styles of Shiraz that we loved. So we always thought that those are the two, and then Meursault, that was kind of just a folly. That was based on the fact that the soil right at the top of the vineyard is this black clay, and it had this sort of plastic quality. It would become very plasticky when it rained, very much like they have in Pomerol, which is also a black clay. So just for absolute amusement, we planted, 5 rows of Merlot, and that was kind of how the Merlot came into being. But essentially, I didn't want to plant Chardonnay because I just thought that I hadn't seen an example anywhere in Australia at that time, this is back in the sort of early 90s, where they compared with white Burgundy. And therefore I sort of was thinking, well, no one can do it. But what I've seen in the last 25 years is that perhaps Chardonnays is where the greatest improvement in Australian wine has been. You've seen incredible wines being made all over the country, and they're really getting that world recognition. I mean, you'll see them in all of the capital cities at fetching very, very high prices. I mean, the Allegra in London it's over 200 pounds a bottle in a restaurant, 250, I think I saw it one day, which was way too rich for my blood. Good. So, yeah.
So, it's been a fantastic tasting again.
One more question of Ray.
Yeah.
If you weren't drinking your own Australian Chardonnay, what would you be drinking? Top 3, please.
Top 3. Oh, well, that's actually not hard. So for me, I think that if we're looking at Chardonnay, you can't really go too far from Bindi. I love the wines that Michael Dillon makes. That is, they're pretty nice. And then in a slightly richer style, I would go for Giaconda. I think the way Giaconda puts Chardonnay together is pretty special. And then it starts to get a little bit, there's a lot, so those first 2, I would go, that's pretty easy. Then in no particular order, I would say Mount Mary, I think those guys are making absolutely stunning wines. Then I would think, that Oakridge, it is pretty special. It's pretty good wine. I've seen them with a few years under their belt, and they are pretty special. They're a bit difficult when they're young, but I think that there's something in them that is pretty interesting.
I'm really curious to see it further on its journey.
I'm trying to think who else I'd buy.
Anything from Tassie?
Yeah, I was just thinking. I do like the wines from Home Oak. That they're pretty good wines. And Stony Rise. I think they make some pretty interesting Chardonnays too. But I was just trying to think. I'm just looking through my cellar now in my head and just seeing who I have in Chardonnay that actually the Golden Ball Chardonnay is pretty cool from Beechworth. I love what James is doing as well. That's really nice one.
I'd always rate the art series as well.
Yeah, of course. Lewin. I like Lewin. I find it a little bit rich for my taste. That's the thing. I guess that's for my taste. It's just a fraction too rich. But it, look, it's packed full of flavour. Absolutely packed full of flavour. Pierrot again. That's another one in that similar sort of style. But yeah, is that enough?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Awesome.
It's got them all down.
I did write them down. Yeah.
So there's a few more too. I'm just trying to think about it. Yeah, there's quite a few. I just have to work. Yeah. Good.
So Ray and everyone, for someone that didn't actually have the wines, I have to say what an educational night it was. And it's just fantastic to hear your enthusiasm and your openness and honesty about the various products and people that some of us know and some of us don't know. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And when my wines turn up, I shall know what to taste.
What happened here?
On the way to Brisbane, isn't it? You're in Queensland, are you, Glenn?
Yeah, that's okay. It's all cool. It's just, you know, I reckon I had $80 worth of entertainment tonight, and I bought some for our sister-in-law, and hers turned up because she's closer to. There she is waving.
Bonding, family bonding over wine from afar.
So thank you.
Probably Anastasia Palaszczuk intercepted them and is drinking them.
Yeah, we're really, really sorry, Glenn. We'll make it up to it's COVID and it's been taking drivers out of the supply line. But normally Brisbane's been okay, so that's why we're a little bit shocked.
Well, I had to deliver a wine yesterday. I think I was to Rowan, dropped into Buninyong, and luckily they got a really good bakery there, so that was good. But and then Steph, I think, dropped the wine off at
Not Mary at Lilydale.
Yeah, so good. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
But no, just before you go, Ray and Daniel, thanks very much. This has been a fantastic experience. We love cool climate Chardonnay, which is why we're growing it, and we're looking forward to the next couple of years as you develop our Chardonnay in your style.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So Alex, Anne and Mike here have a vineyard down at Dean's Marsh, and I'm going to have a bit of a play making some wine for them this year. So it's going to be cool. I had a look at some wine that had been made by another winemaker who's now retired, and from their vineyard, and it looks very exciting. So I'm really looking forward to it. So Dean's Marsh is it's a bit cooler than Geelong. It has a similar perhaps ripening time I'm expecting to Macedon, so Bindi. And so, you know, I think that we could make some pretty interesting wine from there, high acidity and, you know, really minerally and stuff. It'll be cool. That'll be cool fun.
Fantastic.
So thanks for inviting us.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
All right, well, I've got to get in the car.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was lovely to see you all. We're really, really glad that you enjoyed it, and well, hopefully either joining us at the winery or at the next Zoom tasting.
And there's a special offer or whatever, is there? Or
there is a special offer of 20% on the
Bartl.
Except for that. So there's a 1000% not happening. So we are just having to scrape back 6 bottles from Steph as much as I was doing. I was about to reach neck.
It's really unfortunate. I apologise for that, but
the Allegra is available, which is pretty cool.
The Allegra is available. that's well, when you compare it to can you get back vintage Chardonnay of that quality?
Look, to be honest, at the more extended tasting at the winery, the other wine which looked off the charts was actually the estate. The estate level Chardonnay looked really, really good too. So even though the Bartl's not, where the Bartl is different to the estate is that it's just got a little bit more power. It's a little bit more powerful than the estate, but it's pretty close. And the estate's got a little bit more of that stone fruit character because it's slightly warmer. Good. All right then. Thanks, guys. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much.
See you sometime. Actually, we're going to be doing the pick, I guess, in about 8 weeks probably.
We'll be sending out an EDM to do with that. I was discussing it with Marie today.
Yeah, so it'll be, you know, usually it's in the end of March, first part of April, I think, this year. So yeah, if you've got a spare slot in your diary, come and help us pick some Pinot or something, and then you know, have a bit of a bite and drink with us.
You'll get word through the grapevine.
All right, see you guys. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.
I'm going to do that one day, Doc.
Yeah.
Right.